follow and like on our Facebook page. Good morning to everybody listening to 107.3 here in the Baton Rouge capital city area. To switch gears talking about football right now, did you guys get a chance on Monday to watch the FCS National Championship? And, of course, I talk FCS National Championship because Southern University, the SWAC, and the MEAC both participate on the FCS level. Southern this past year took on FCS Nichols that plays right there in the Southland Conference, a team that has been in the FCS playoffs before. And, you know, looking at these teams, North Dakota State took on Montana State. North Dakota State goes on to win this game 35-32, and what I thought was one hell of a game. And then you're looking at their quarterback, Cam Miller, going on the other side. Montana State had a really good quarterback in Tommy Mollett, and these guys went back and forward when you look at and this is one of the things, building FCS teams, right? I'm listening to Prairie View's new coach, Coach Tremaine, who came over from Valdosta State, who took Valdosta State, which is a Division II perennial power. How about that? And he took that team to a Division II national championship. Of course, they fell short in the national championship, but Valdosta State knows what it takes to win. They traditionally have done that on the Division II level. And looking over it, right, when you get deep into the FCS playoffs and you start to talk about getting to the semifinals and into the national championship, the teams have not really changed. And the teams that were typically competing and being able to cross that threshold have all since made jumps into the FBS. The Georgia Southerns, the James Madisons, Appalachian State, even Sam Houston, who won a championship during that spring abbreviated season, right? Other teams you look at that were perennial powers who couldn't quite get into there. Let's take a Jacksonville State, for example, right? But now when you're looking at these teams that are making it to the semifinals and able to get over into that next threshold of the semifinals, you're seeing who those teams are. They're the Montanas, the Montana States, the South Dakota States, the North Dakota States. And watching those programs, I'm listening to a video earlier this week because I've always been curious, especially with North Dakota State, being able to continue to keep it up year after year. They have lost coach after coach after coach, but what they continue to do is, and Chris and I talked about this when he called in, they reach down into the coaching tree of the staff and they continue to promote from within. But one thing that you see stays the same with North Dakota State is the system that's in place. North Dakota State has been who they are with their system for at least 10 plus years now. And everybody that they promote up does not say, well, hey, I'm going to try to do it my way. They continue to do what the system is set up to do with that program. That's why that is a program and not just a football team. But at the same time, it is the flagship school of North Dakota. You have North Dakota, you have North Dakota State the same way in South Dakota, you have South Dakota, you have South Dakota State. The same way in Montana, you got Montana State. The way those teams have been built, have been going out, and of course, everybody gets the transfers, right? Everybody does it. We've been doing it. But they go out and they get that talent, underrated talent from right there around the Midwest, and they develop it up. And you see that success. Those guys that they're getting on that O-line and D-line that wreak havoc aren't household names coming out of high school. They get those guys, they put them through a system, and they develop them up. Now, some of those guys, of course, like many, as I said before, they bring them in and they develop them. They bring them in, they come through the transfer portal. You get the best of both worlds, right? But most of all, it's the developmental process that they do and that they have that keeps them on top. And the conversation always comes, well, when you look at teams, particularly like in the South, and you're looking at the SWAC, we saw FAMU be the first team in the SWAC since the 90s, just a few years ago, under Coach Willie Simmons, get into the FCS playoffs. Now, Southern and Grambling, as we know, because of the Bayou Classic during Thanksgiving weekend, will never participate in the FCS playoffs because they're not going to give up that weekend. Just too valuable for the schools, too valuable for the city of New Orleans. Now, is there a thought to maybe give it up? I don't know. Because I'm also looking at the idea of looking at the FCS playoffs. What if we did an HBCU football playoff? Now, the thing is, and I had this conversation with my man Scotty, a.k.a. Offscript, on his show about how does it work? How would it work? What would you do? And would fans even support it, or would be at that point, considering December, would you be kind of footballed out? Because I looking at the SWAC championship last year with Southern and Jackson, it looked like people were kind of footballed out, right? And I say because of the attendance. Now, when you get to the Celebration Bowl has continued to lead the way. Matter of fact, the Celebration Bowl is at the top of the chain when you look at the FCS World postseason. It has outdrawn, television-wise, the FCS National Championship, even with the big brand of North Dakota State and the Montanas. But, of course, they come from small media markets. The rest of the country are not watching those teams as though you can get a Jackson State on television. You can get a Southern on television because of the ESPN deal, because of the HBCU Go deal. So those teams aren't garnishing the eyes and the attention the same way when I look at the UC Davis, who is pretty good. Same way I look at the Sacramento States, right? They don't garner the viewership that you get from the SWAC, and particularly down here in the South. Even when I'm looking at attendance, I believe this year the Celebration Bowl, mid-high 30,000, right? But when you look at the viewership, you're talking 2+ million people watching the Celebration Bowl. Now, I do understand on the other side with the FCS National Championship is in a way smaller venue. I believe it's Frisco, Texas. Next year, it'll be moving. I believe it'll be at Nashville at Vanderbilt Stadium next year, if I'm not mistaken. The venue will change for a couple years. Before it was in Frisco, I believe it was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But when you look at those programs, when you look at the fact that they cannot get the viewership that we get, but those schools, when you look at their budgets, when you look at who they are, they're able to offer a lot more. And it makes it tough because I get people who say, well, we should see more HBCUs participate in the FCS playoffs. That's fine and dandy when you get into that first round, maybe second round. But you start to see the separation, especially when you get to those type of schools, once you get deeper into that thing. And the last thing you want to do, especially with those teams with those home games, you want to go to Montana State in December? Huh? You think it's cold down here? Y'all think you got snow in Arkansas and Virginia and Georgia? You want to go up there? Just ask Tennessee State, who played a really good game, by the way. Tennessee State, of course, an HBCU who participates in the Ohio Valley Conference. Won a share of the conference this year. Beat Southeast Missouri State, who was a really good program this year. They fell short to Tennessee Tech as well as UT Martin, other programs that are really good. Of course, South Carolina State, who made it to the Celebration Bowl against Jackson State, beat Tennessee Tech this year. But I say all of that to say I think certain things work for certain groups. The method, the madness behind it. There's only so far we can go. And as good as Jackson State's team was this year, who crowned the Celebration Bowl champion and the HBCU national champion, how far would they have really gone in the FCS playoffs? I don't think they can hold a candle to North Dakota State and Montana State. Even South Dakota State. Now, I think there are some teams out there that Jackson State, as the Black College National Champion, could have beaten this year. And I want to see Jackson State, especially with the way that it seems that they building and where they're headed, I would like to see them play more FCS schools. You know, considering Alcorn, Southern, and Grambling, we're all in FCS country because we're in the back door. We're all sharing space with the Southland. Even Prairie View and Texas Southern. All of us as SWAC members, you have seen take on Southland opponents, and then you have Pine Bluff taking on UAPB up there. Jackson State is right there. Matter of fact, Jackson State is right down the highway on the same interstate to go straight down to Hammond, and you got Southeastern right there. We've seen Alcorn taking on Stephen F. Austin, McNeese. Southern is taking on McNeese, Nichols, Northwestern State. Texas Southern taking on Lamar. We've seen Prairie View take on Sam Houston when they were around, all types of teams, right? I would like to see Jackson State on that level. Of course, I know they played Mercer a few years back when Coach Prime was there. Played them for homecoming, beat them. But I want to see what they look like in the grand scheme of FCS. They used to take on Tennessee State, which, let me tell you, I would have loved to see that matchup between Jackson State and Tennessee State this past year. To me, those were two top 5 HBCU football programs. Now, will that game ever come back to be at the Southern Heritage Classic? Probably not. I'm not sure. Jackson, at this point, they said, you know, yesterday's price is not today's price. UAPB has since filled the void. But looking at those matchups, I would like to see our best, which was Jackson State this year. I want to see what they look like against FCS opponents on a regular basis. Even Alabama A&M and Alabama State. Bama State was playing Kennesaw State. A&M was playing Sanford, North Alabama. Now, FAMU is another program in Bethune-Cookman because in that area, I believe they're the only 2 FCS programs in the state of Florida. So stepping outside of the conference play to them is to go play a MEAC school, right?